The opinions you hear on Your Mountain from individual hosts or guests do not necessarily represent those of Your Mountain, our sponsors, or other entities we're affiliated with professionally or otherwise. You've waited long enough. Go listen to the show.
There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is Your Mountain.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. I'm your host, David Wilms. Co-host Nephi Cole actually can speak right now. No, he can't.
I can always speak,
Nephi.
Dave.
I know. How are you doing, Nephi?
I'm good, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I got licenses in the mail today.
You know what? I got some licenses too. It was very, very exciting. I got my antelope license.
Me too.
I'm so excited. We were just talking about this.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. It is my favorite. I don't know if this is my favorite hunt, but it's my favorite thing to put in the freezer is antelope. I absolutely love it. There's nothing better, and it's really fun. It's like a great first big game hunt for people because typically antelope hunting, some of the things that make it a great big game hunt can also lead to, we'll call it meat tragedy with antelope, but it's early in the year, right? So it's warm, and you can spend a lot of time talking to people and a lot of time behind glass, and that's a good time. And then, it's like you're not going to freeze to death antelope hunting. So at least usually not. And it's just a lot of fun. And so if I got a buddy that's coming from out of state, like first big game hunt and everything, it's just like, man, antelope hunting is underrated in my opinion.
Antelope hunting is not underrated. It's a blast. Antelope eating is overrated.
You're not taking care of it right. Because the last couple that we've had, and here's the thing I tell everybody, is like with antelope, if you're chasing antelope in your pickup truck, which tends to be a negative thing, when somebody's like flying around and they're like, oh, they just ran over the hill, so let's drive 4 miles and then chase the antelope some more and drive and chase them some more. If you find antelope and you've just got them full of adrenaline and heat and everything like that, yeah, I buy it. It's probably a bad idea. And you throw them in the back of a pickup truck and it's just like, you're baking the meat on the way into the processor. Yeah, you might have some issues. I've never had that. It's been shot flopping down and then put them in the back of the truck. Immediately get the guts out of them and then the glands off of them and then immediately to processing. And it's just, man, it's amazing. It's the best stuff we get.
I want to bring somebody into this discussion. We have a guest this week that I want to bring into this discussion. The executive director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, Steve Smith.
Well, good afternoon, guys,
for joining us.
Steve.
Absolutely. I appreciate you bringing me in, Dave, but real quick, I was just enjoying hearing the discussion between you guys as somebody who is thinking about a trip in the not too distant future out west and trying to decide what to hunt. I was fascinated by the discussion on antelope. That is now on my list.
How's your Pennsylvania antelope? Good?
Yeah, not very filling here in Pennsylvania. So looking forward to potentially improving that. So appreciate the discussion so far. I've already jotted down some notes. So thank you guys.
Well, I gotta give a couple of notes because I haven't. I got to respond to Nephi. Nephi's approach apparently is post up a half a mile away, catch them while they're sleeping, drive up, throw them in the back of the truck. Gut them in the field, throw them in the back of the truck, drive to town, do something with it. I don't know. My approach is a little different. Nephi, just like in the timber, you know how we joke how I'm the timber ninja elk hunting. So on antelope, I kind of like to do some of the same stuff. Obviously, it's in the sagebrush.
He likes to chase them, Steve.
I don't like to chase them. I like to do spot and stock. I love spot and stock. But I like to get as close as physically possible before I pull the trigger. So last year's was at like 80 yards. And then I bone them out in the field. I don't take the whole carcass out. I just pull the meat out. And I throw it on ice in a cooler immediately, and I age it for probably a week in that cooler before I process it, and I cut it all up myself. But the same point you made is right. I think if you get them when they're not pumped full of adrenaline, right, and then you get them dealt with immediately. I think the place where you get a problem is the antelope that are running hard, and then folks that like, it's 80 degrees out on that early September day, and like, what we're gonna do? We're gonna gut this out and then hang it in a tree for the next 4 days while we keep doing our hunt. I think that's where you wind up with some meat that maybe doesn't taste as good as it could. But yeah, get it. It's all about the like how you care for the meat immediately. I truly believe that.
100%.
Totally different approaches, but the end result I think is the same, which is treat that meat with care.
Yeah, that said,
and immediately.
You can have good antelope, you can have bad antelope, and it depends on a lot of stuff. You can have, and as you know, like you can have good elk and bad elk. For as much as like you like elk, like I've had some amazing elk, and then, I don't know, Dave, do you love all the elk you've ever?
Look, here's what I'll say. I'll only say one elk. I'll give one elk. I think they all have great flavor. I've never had an elk that had terrible flavor. I had one elk that had flavor that it was in your mouth for a long time because you had to chew it forever because it was shoe leather. It was a big old bull, and it was almost inedible because you may as well have just cut your leather belt up into strips and thrown it in the slow cooker and see what comes out. But it was flavorful. It was just you were tasting it for a really long time. Now there are elk in Pennsylvania, though.
There absolutely are. There absolutely are. Yep. Haven't been fortunate enough to draw a tag and don't expect to anytime soon. But the one elk that I did harvest out in Colorado was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. So that was definitely worth the trip.
What was the elk? Was it a bull or a cow?
It was a bull. It was a bull. I got it in the San Juans. I kind of just picked what I could picture being one of the most difficult hunts possible and decided I was going to go for it. So I did a do-it-yourself backpack hunt into the San Juans with a coworker of mine who's now a game warden. He wasn't at the time, but he went in with me, and we ended up getting an elk out of there. And it's one of those things coming from the East, totally did not understand just how difficult it was to backpack an elk out of the San Juans, just two guys. But we did it, and we still talk about it. It's been almost 10 years, and we still talk about it because it was quite the experience.
I tell Dave, the other day we were talking about this, and this plays into my hunting, the way I hunt, and I don't care if people agree with me or not. I'm looking for the biggest elk I've ever seen, but I've got some big elk hanging in my house, and if I don't find a bull that's gonna like rival that, like I'm just gonna pass on the bulls and just keep on hunting, and in the end, I will swat a small cow. And I will take that thing all day long as table fare. I'm telling you. And I feel the same way about antelope. And Dave's like, he's kind of shaking his head because I enjoy hunting. I enjoy going with family. I enjoy going with friends. But I really enjoy cooking more, as well, I guess you should say. And so I'm smart enough to know that, like, I know everybody wants to shoot big horns, but you don't eat the horns.
Absolutely right. And I'm the same way here in Pennsylvania with whitetails. I'd rather put a freezer full of doe, freezer full of antlerless whitetails away and just, use that venison all year, as opposed to maybe just getting one buck. Given those scenarios, I'm taking the freezer full of antlerless deer all year round.
And I can't wait to talk about some of the days that you can now take antlerless deer in Pennsylvania. This is my segue.
What a great transition.
Isn't it a beautiful transition? I wanted to transition into first, though, before we get into the topic du jour. Maybe can you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a bit about yourself, your background.
Sure, be glad to.
Yeah, it'd be great.
My name is Steve Smith. I'm the executive director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Have been for just over a year now. But as you could probably pick up on, given our conversation so far, I've come to this position and as a lifelong Pennsylvania hunter, somebody grew up like so many of us did here in Pennsylvania, just absolutely crazy about hunting, and in particular whitetails. That is Uh, that's the pinnacle for a lot of us here in Pennsylvania, and that was my interest in the outdoors, my gateway to conservation. My career took a very non-linear route to working to the Game Commission and to becoming executive director, but I couldn't be happier with how it has ended to date and to be into this position. And kind of what you mentioned earlier, your transition there, kind of the pinnacle being here, getting Sunday hunting done and being able to provide that opportunity to our hunters.
I think that's an amazing. I can't wait to talk a little more about it. Tell us a little bit about hunting in Pennsylvania. Dave and I were talking about this, and Wyoming, there are 500,000 people in the state of Wyoming. That's basically, right? 500,000. That's our population. We have more antelope than people in Wyoming. And so what's it like in Pennsylvania? What are your hunter numbers like? What are your species like?
The culture of hunting in Pennsylvania is incredibly strong, and it is, as you would imagine, just a source of pride for us here at the Game Commission. We have roughly 1 million hunters. Now, we don't sell 1 million licenses every year because, as with every other state, not everybody who considers themselves a hunter is able to hunt every year. So our license sales are in the neighborhood of about 850,000, and they've been in that area they've been going pretty steady for about the past 5-6 years around that number of 850,000. But when we do surveys on just general population who considers themselves a hunter, we're in just north of around 1 million Pennsylvania residents who consider themselves a hunter, which is, pretty incredible when you think about those numbers. I believe that puts us second to only Texas as far as licenses sold. But as I said, that culture, it's deeply rooted here in the Commonwealth. Pennsylvania, the name means Penn's Woods. It was founded by providing those opportunities for hunters. It goes back to colonial times, 1600. It's a big part of our traditions, a big part of our culture. And you can see that certainly driving throughout the Commonwealth. It's routine to pass a residence, and in the background there's their 3D archery target. This time of year they start popping up everywhere. You see them. People are starting to think about the fall, thinking about hunting season. And despite all of that, though, for years there was a prohibition on hunting on Sundays. That we again were just fortunate and able to get that ban overturned, and are excited about what that's going to mean moving forward and how we can grow that culture.
Can you talk a little bit about the history of that? Because and to for the context, I guess, and you mentioned it, and I think your number is. I'm not going to question it. And I think it's right that you have the second most licenses sold behind Texas. We always say that per capita we have,
there you go,
either the most or the second most hunters per capita, and you have double the hunters that we have people, which is it's just mind-boggling to me. And I think sometimes in the West, living in the West, we sometimes don't realize how deep the hunting culture is in some of the eastern states, and particularly a state like Pennsylvania. And so I always found it fascinating when you have a state that has this deep, long tradition of hunting, that you also had this deep, long tradition of not hunting on Sunday. And I would love some context, some history behind, like, how did that come into being? And I mean, it's for hundreds of years, right? Like, how did that come into being, and how did it become so ingrained in the culture and so difficult to change?
Well, I mean, you're spot on. And I think it's funny when I have this conversation with individuals from another state, because I can remember very vividly the first time I talked to somebody, and he was from Colorado. And he just casually mentioned that he had killed an elk on a Sunday, and it blew my mind. I stopped him, like, what do you mean you can hunt on Sundays? And he said, yeah, you guys can't. And we just had this moment of trying to make sense of what the other person just said, because, in a lot of states, it was never a thing, right? Of course you could hunt on Sundays. But for Pennsylvania, our traditions run deep, and one of which was what are referred to as the Blue Laws. And that is, there was a series of laws put in place And it goes back almost about 2 centuries, and those laws were originally designed to kind of direct human behavior, specifically to reducing the number of activities that were taking place on Sundays so that individuals would have that day available to go to a place of worship. So it was designed, again, to kind of remove distractions around anything else taking place and to kind of manipulate, for lack of a better term, behavior into going to church on Sundays. And while that was the original purpose, I think even as that kind of church going has declined, nonetheless, that law, that tradition remained, and it stayed firmly in place. Again, even though other blue laws were starting one by one to kind of drop off the books, that one held on and that one remained.
Yeah,
Do you have any sense of why that is? Why others were able to drop off? Because things like restaurants being open on Sundays or not being open, like those types of things went away. Why was hunting one of the last things, one of the last holdouts?
Where it carried over then is probably we were, I'd say, maybe a victim of our own success. And given the fact that we have so many hunters, and given the fact that there is the potential for hunters to, when you're talking almost 1 million of them, a lot of that hunting taking place on private land. And what we were hearing, I mean, kind of the argument, the longstanding argument against the expansion of Sunday hunting was those private landowners want a day of rest. They want a day where nobody's knocking on their door asking if they can go hunting. So that was part of it. Another part was also we were hearing from individuals who just maybe like going for a hike on a Sunday, taking their dog for a walk, going riding a mountain bike on a Sunday. And there was concerns about conflicts with other uses. So even as what I'll term the original intent of the law kind of faded, what we were hearing is concerns about impact of hunting with those private property owners and with other outdoor recreationists.
Yep, I think that's a really good, a great assessment, and I think you see that in other areas, but in the wildlife, in the hunting space, that's you can see that in other states with different issues where you have a traditional regulation that's developed for a purpose, and then time changes, the background changes, but the reg stays the same. And when you go to update that, these other factors now play in. And so some examples would be straight wall cartridge, restrictions in some states. Some states have unique rules related to either archery or black powder and things like that, or the use of an optic, things like that. And you can see, like, you understand why they came up with the original legislation. That makes sense. Why they came up with the original rule. That makes sense. But then over time, as things change, the entire backdrop of the argument totally changes, but the reg remains. And then just as a matter of tradition, it's actually really tough to get the regulation changed later. And I think you guys deserve a lot of credit for tackling that and be willing and saying, like, hey, look, let's look at this with fresh eyes. Let's figure out where should we really be? What's the purpose of the rule? And what's the background? How do we make this work for today?
That's a great way to summarize it. It does feel kind of like the goalpost is always moving, right? When the original intent is no longer there, but it's a new purpose kind of substitutes that. And that's what we were absolutely up against. And we can certainly talk about what that process looked like, but I'll mention it here when we talk about that conflict with other outdoor recreationists. As the bill was making its way through the General Assembly and the various committees, we were up against what looked to be the biggest committee where any obstacle was going to come up, it was going to be here. And in fact, that bill did come through that committee with one vote, and the deciding vote was an individual who grew up in Wyoming. And he talked about, I hear all the concerns about conflict with other users. I'm telling you, as somebody who spent a couple decades in a state where Sunday hunting is just automatic, that outdoor recreationists and hunters can coincide, can side by side on a Sunday without the conflict that individuals are potentially worried about. And I think that voice from somebody who lived it and could speak directly to those concerns and could talk about what he considered to be unfounded concerns, carried a lot of weight. And like I said, that ended up being the deciding vote on moving that bill along.
So maybe you could walk us through the changes. So if you could lay out the law and like what does it do? If you could just go through and say like, okay, we're saying that now we got Sunday hunting. You guys had a couple of days before though, right?
We did.
So how is this different?
Yeah, the law, how it has traditionally been phrased is a section in our Game and Wildlife Code that spells out hunting on Sundays is prohibited. And then originally there were very few exceptions written into it for foxes, coyotes, and for crows. So other than those three species, hunting on Sundays was prohibited. And then about 6 years ago, that legislation was changed. That section of the law was amended to allow for Sunday hunting on 3 days, 3 additional days, one on firearms deer season, one on firearms bear season, and one up to the discretion of the commission for what that third day should be. So that I can't really overstate how significant that was. That was the first crack, right? Like we were able to get that in place. That was a compromise, as you would expect. From our perspective, the agency's perspective, we would have just rather had that section entirely removed. However, that was clearly a bridge too far for a lot of people at that time. So a legislator, Senator Dan Laughlin, has made this his signature issue over the years. He was able to get a legislation passed, creating that 3-day exception for those big game hunting, because our board went ahead and used that third day that was at their discretion for bear. And what that really did is changed the whole discussion, because now we could talk about Sunday hunting has been in place for 3 days and for 3 high-profile days. And all the concerns that people have mentioned haven't come to fruition. We're not seeing members of the public being mistaken for game. We're not seeing an increase in hunting-related shooting incidents. We're just not. We're not hearing complaints about trespassing or landowners being disturbed on large scale. So that kind of showed that this could work in the Commonwealth. That led to the introduction of a bill early on this session. And from our perspective, we love a clean bill. We love clean amendments to our code. And you couldn't get much cleaner than this. It just struck out the prohibition on Sunday hunting. The implication then being that our board can regulate Sunday hunting just like they can any other day of the week. And that is, in fact, what our governor signed into law just last week.
So I got a couple of things. I think I've been listening to all this and a couple of things flying through my mind. One, just backstepping just a minute to the conflict question. Right? And, you mentioned, I was in my head, I'm like, I wonder if this person that grew up in Wyoming might be somebody that Nephi or I might know, but that's neither here nor there. But I'll give an example of where maybe this could be advantageous to folks too. I was on a backcountry trip, a couple of years ago in Colorado in September. Had the family out, and we were doing a big hike, and came across somebody that had just killed a bull elk archery hunting, and I was just out recreating with the family and kind of helped them break it down and quarter it up and get it all set up for them to pack out. So it actually, it was symbiotic relationship with the outdoor recreationist and the hunter, helped the hunter out. But I guess bringing it back to Pennsylvania, first of all, it's remarkable to me how it probably felt you in the trenches that it took forever. But really, when you're talking about changing something that's been in place for hundreds of years, and you got the first change 5-6 years ago to open up 3 days, and now completely remove the prohibition. In some ways, when you're talking in legislative terms, that's almost warp speed. And I'm curious, like, any takeaways, lessons learned that you had from that 5-6 year process to get to this point? Because I know the other thing you haven't talked about, and I'd love to talk about, is the landowner piece of this, because I know that the landowner piece of this was a big component of the discussion. And so how do you go from never to 3 days to hunting, the ability to regulate and allow hunting every Sunday in 6 years and address those concerns? I just love the sort of the autopsy on this, like your takeaways from how you work with these various communities and get to that point. Because people might think this took forever, but in my experience working on legislative issues, that's actually pretty fast.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. Legislative issues never move this fast, right? So to go from where we were to where we are now, so relatively quickly is, I think it's a testament to a lot of things. One of which is that relationship that we have built over the past couple of years with landowners, with in particular our state farm bureau. The Farm Bureau had traditionally not been supportive of Sunday hunting. That was not something that they were willing to. When I talked about the concerns for landowner complaints and somebody knocking on your door saying, "I want to hunt your field on a Sunday," that was their issue. They had concerns with that. They were not comfortable with expanding hunting to include what traditionally has been considered a day of rest. However, what I think a couple of things happened. First of all, is those 3 days were crucial. So showing that a big change, showing that it can work incrementally, and giving people the ability to be comfortable with it, I think is significant. And those first couple of days, and again, they were high profile days. We're talking firearms deer, which is the Super Bowl in Pennsylvania, the end of archery season, firearms bear. Those are big hunter participation days. And after seeing it for a couple of years, that there really wasn't that conflict between landowners and hunters, that was significant. A second aspect of it, though, was a recognition on behalf of landowners and on behalf of the Farm Bureau. I think that Sunday hunting could work to their advantage. It could be something that turns out to be beneficial for them because it will get more hunter participation on their properties, which creates a potential for removing some additional deer off of those fields, those deer that are damaging their crops, impacting their livelihood. Having more hunters out there doing what hunters do best and reducing deer populations in areas where there's conflict with agriculture could be a really good thing. So that went a long way to bringing the landowners, in particular the Farm Bureau, over to our side and being, quite frankly, some of our biggest allies in the past year on seeing this legislative shift. And then the third thing I'll mention, since coming into this role, and I have some background in the legislative arena, it's where I kind of cut my teeth with the agency. So when I stepped into this role as executive director, I thought, how can I use that to my advantage? And one thing that I learned from working with the legislature is it's really hard to overstate the importance of relationships. So I made it a priority for our staff and in particular with our Board of Commissioners to be more visible, to develop more relationships with the House members, with the senators in their districts. And we've gone essentially a full court press on involving them, getting them, the members of the General Assembly out. And there's been plenty of times where I'd be having conversations and talking about Sunday hunting. And I would say to a member of our General Assembly, I would say, what this bill would do is it would let our Board of Commissioners set the dates for hunting seasons. And you know who your local board member is. You just met with him last week. You went out to a Game Lands and took a look at some of the habitat work that we're doing. And I think that's a small thing, but I think it's significant in the grand scheme of building those relationships, showing the people, the decision makers, that there's when I talk about our Board of Commissioners, that's an individual, that's a person, and you have that relationship with them because with that comes the trust. And I think really all of those things came together, to our benefit, and that's why we're here having this discussion.
I'm so proud of you guys. So Dave and I, full disclosure, we went to Pennsylvania. We were Your Mountain podcast. We talked to your all employees conference. And I know for a fact, I'm not saying we're responsible for this, but I know for a fact that was a big part of what we talked about is how to visit with the legislators and the public, and how to just represent the agency well and work on those things. And I just think it's so exciting that you guys are able to, really do that to the level that you've done it on this issue, because it's a really, these issues are hunting issues, like it or not, they're always controversial, and they're different in every state. So, for example, you mentioned issues with the benefit of having hunters out there to reduce deer populations, and it's really interesting how different that is in the West right now. You may not know, but there's actually a contingent of individuals who are hunters who are trying to get less people hunting, who are trying to limit the amount of people that get access. They're like kind of the anti-R3 guys, because they want opportunity just for them. They don't want to share it with everybody else. And it's so interesting to see in Pennsylvania that different perspective of how now people are saying, like, okay, look, hunting is a management tool and not just a recreational tool. And we actually need it for the management aspect in a big way. And that's just exciting to me that you guys are going through that. You mentioned some of the things with the landowners and things that they were concerned about. And so I wanted to ask you about one in particular, trespassing. And I know that there was some discussion early on in this bill of additional tools with regards to trespass. Did any of that stick in this bill? How did that turn out?
It did. And that was part of it. That was part of the discussions that we had with the Farm Bureau on what they would like to see in order to get to the point where they could support this bill. Again, I think they recognized the value in getting more hunters out for today, and as well as, for generations to come, and the impact that'll have, exactly what you talked about there, Nephi, as far as managing wildlife. But also, I think they had some very legitimate concerns about, potential trespassing, and wanted to see some teeth put into the law when it comes to trespass on their properties. And that was something that we were very happy to work with them if that's what it would take. And again, they had some entirely legitimate concerns about the impacts on their properties. Then we were happy to see that included into the law and supported those provisions as well.
So what does that look like in Pennsylvania?
As far as the penalties?
Yeah. So what is it? What are the changes? And so if I'm coming to Pennsylvania to hunt for the first time, corner crossing isn't going to be my issue in Pennsylvania. I want to know what does trespassing look like in Pennsylvania for hunters?
Well, it's also kind of now graded on a scale where, and we have a purple paint law provision in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys are familiar with.
No, but I love it just because it's called the purple paint law. Dave, let's see what we can do. Let's start drafting.
Let me see if I can guess it. If I get this right, and you can correct me.
Okay.
Because I think I've heard of this in some other states. Is this you have to, if you have the purple paint, it's identifying a property that you have to actually get permission to access. It's kind of the way of posting as a no trespass.
Exactly.
And if you don't have that, it's almost free access. So it's a duty I don't want to call it fence out, but it's a duty to post no trespassing, and in order for a hunter to actually know that I need permission to hunt on this.
So you are very close. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. You did. Okay. No, there still is the expectation and the duty to have permission to come onto private property in Pennsylvania, but a purple paint, given concerns, if somebody posted, just put up a sign, there's the potential for that sign to come down, somebody to rip it off. Paint has a more permanent fixture to it. So a purple paint on a tree, a purple marking on a tree with that paint indicates essentially don't even think about it. I mean, that's the easiest way to term it. It is reaching the level of a defiant trespass to come onto property with the purple paint, because there's no mistaking those boundary lines, right? If there's no marking, no posting, I thought I was on property that I had permission to. I didn't realize that I crossed over, so the penalties are not as significant. But if you enter that land with the purple paint, you are doing so willfully. There's no negligence involved. There's an assumption of this individual intentionally entered property that they did not have permission to, so the penalties increase accordingly.
It's interesting how they're different in different states. So for folks who are going, for example, to hunt in Wyoming, You don't get a warning. Like everything's that way. You have a responsibility to know where you're at, and if you're on private
Right.
property, it's a trespass immediately. There's not a
Which, yeah, but it's interesting, right? In Wyoming, because we have different trespass laws. So
if you got a
if
gun
you're-
with you.
if you're hunting, if you're trespassing to hunt, you have to know where you are and you'll be cited. If you're hiking, recreational use, maybe shed hunting, even other things like that, it's the duty of the landowner to post that property and say no trespassing. And if they don't post it, and you go on, you're not cited, you're not guilty of a trespass. But if you're hunting, you're guilty of a separate violation of trespass. There's like 4 different trespass laws here.
It's confusing. And I think at the end of the day, it's why we emphasize for our hunters, get permission to be where you are. I think, if you're worried about the grading of the offense and whether or not it's defiant trespass or not, I mean, you're missing the issue. The issue is make sure you have permission to be there. And I think probably all of us in Pennsylvania have had that property where we hunted for years, and then the landowner just got tired of trespassers, so they shut it down. I know I've dealt with that multiple times, and there's nothing more frustrating for a hunter than to have to drive by that piece of property where you used to have access, but you know that somebody was careless and didn't want to take the time to go about it the right way, so that they lost it for you and for everybody else. So we emphasize as part of our hunter trapper education program, just like I'm sure our counterparts do across the country, of, hey, it's the duty on the hunter to know where they are. Whether, again, don't worry about the grading of the offense, summary, misdemeanor, whatever it may be. Just do the right thing, because you never know what the implications could be for you and for everybody else.
Yeah, there's
Well, and if you do the right thing, the trespassing law and the offenses and the losing hunting privileges and all that, it doesn't even matter. As long
It
as you do
doesn't
the right
matter.
thing, that doesn't
Right.
matter.
yeah, there's
Right, exactly.
there are very few excuses today to not know where you are, and while we are not sponsored by Onyx, we should be. And everybody, like, just put it on your phone, and just to have the ability to go and know where you're at. It makes the world a better place, and don't be afraid, and ask. So many of these things with hunters, we can do so much for ourselves if we'll just build good relationships. And
Absolutely.
just by being good neighbors and talking to people, and it pays dividends, and it'll pay dividends. I promise you. Anybody listening to this, getting to know a few landowners and being helpful in some cases, it'll pay dividends for years. It's worth being a good neighbor.
It absolutely is. And I think it's also a just good practice to check in from time to time as well, and make sure that that permission that maybe you acquired, 2-3 years ago is still valid. You never know if that property has changed hands. I think from a landowner's perspective, there's probably nothing more frustrating than when they catch somebody and that individual says, well, 20 years ago, I was told I could hunt here. In the meantime, that property, was sold 3 different times. And now, it just puts hunters, I think, in general, in a bad light. So I think, again, regardless of the grading of the offense or whatever the case may be, best practices for hunters, make sure you have permission, and just check in. I think at the beginning of a hunting season, just check in, make sure that permission is still valid. And then at the end of the year, if you're successful, it doesn't hurt to drop off a couple stakes. That's a great way to make sure that permission continues.
That's a really good suggestion. Maybe Nephi can drop off some antelope steaks.
I was just about to say
I'll
that.
put them in the
That's
mail.
As good as, he made them sound.
I'll put them in the mail today. I've got a brown paper envelope right here.
I do have one more question here. Well, probably several more questions, but coming back to the actual the repeal of the Sunday hunting prohibition. How have you decided how? Well, let me back up. It repeals it, but then the commission still has the authority to write regulations and set hunting seasons and decide whether, okay, so now it's not prohibited, but now as an agency, we can decide, if I'm interpreting this right, we can decide whether to actually now allow the hunting on those Sundays. And have you made a decision yet how you're going to approach? Are you going to phase it in? Is it going to be like right out of the gates, it's open everywhere, every Sunday for everything. Like, how are you approaching this change?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a really complicated one, given the timing of when the legislation was signed and given the timing of when it's going to take effect. Like most bills, it has a 60-day period before it takes effect. That's pretty standard, at least here in Pennsylvania. So the legislation was signed last week. It'll take effect right in early September at the beginning of our hunting seasons. Our board traditionally sets hunting seasons in the spring. So they finalized that process in April of this year. So we are in quite a situation where the law is going to take effect in September, right at the brink of our hunting seasons. The law removes any prohibition on Sunday hunting, but however, our board has already set the seasons for this year. So we are looking at what our options might be for this year, and quite frankly, my answer is still be, and this is what I told our governor last week, it's still be we're to be determined on what that's going to look like. We are evaluating, again, if there is a path forward, because we know the expectation is going to be from a lot of our hunters that, they're going to read that headline, a Sunday hunting ban removed, and they're going to be chomping at the bit to go hunting this fall. So we're looking at what options we can provide to them. Once we get through this year, and this year, again, is an anomaly with all those factors at play and the timing here. Once we get past this year, then our board will consider it like they do everything else. And they'll take into consideration the social aspects. They'll look at, again, those concerns about potential conflict, when would be an appropriate time to set a season, but then also they'll look at the biological implications. We are talking for a lot of hunters about potentially doubling their time out in the field. So we're going to be very closely monitoring participation, monitoring the harvest rates, see what the implications are going to be. And every year, then our board will go through the two-step regulatory process and make decisions about where Sunday hunting can work for that particular season.
Well, I cannot help but put on my former agency counsel hat for just a
Please.
second.
Yeah.
And I don't know Pennsylvania law at all. But I do know that here we had provisions under our State Administrative Procedure Act that allowed for situations like that, where we had the legislature act, or like for us, sometimes we were waiting on setting waterfowl seasons because it would happen after all of the other season setting, because we're waiting on, I'm drawing blank, but through the market
Federal guidelines.
Thank you. The federal guidelines to come out for purposes of being able to set state waterfowl seasons, that we had provisions where we could establish emergency regulations under our state APA that were good for 120 days, while we then went through a more formal rulemaking process. And we could potentially do that twice. And in some instances, maybe you don't even do the formal rulemaking because the need for it exhausted after the 120 days. I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm just saying, those. So I think about that as those must be some of the things you look at. But I also think about on the enforcement side, like if I had my agency representation cap on, where you have a law that's passed and everybody sees the headlines, Sunday hunting now allowed, and maybe they're not tracking the regulations as closely as they should be because they're seeing the big, centerfold story on the newspaper. If people still get paper copies and centerfold means anything to anybody anymore,
Right.
but they're seeing the big headlines. And I can see the enforcement side of this being a challenge in the first season as well. And have you had, so it's sort of a two-parter, but one, are you looking at some of those types of creative legal solutions? And two, are you thinking about that enforcement side, like somebody that now just says, I guess I can hunt on a Sunday, and goes and does it?
Yeah, I would say yes and yes. And it feels, David, like you've been in those conversations with us. That's exactly some of the topics we've been addressing internally as we look at what our Commonwealth documents law allows agencies as far as any procedures regarding an emergency regulation, streamlining it, and then also being very cognizant of your last point, that the expectation is going to be that Sunday hunting is happening this fall. And it would create, I think, an enforcement nightmare if we were out there citing individuals saying no the Administrative Process Act doesn't allow for a regulation in time. That's a hard argument to sell to the average hunter, particularly one who's been writing emails for years to get this ban overturned. So those are, quite frankly, that's what's keeping me up at night as we head into the fall, trying to think about how we can implement it. It's a good problem to have. I'm glad that it's the discussion that is taking place, but we are just really doing our due diligence to look at all options, and then we'll make a decision here.
Yeah, it can be tough, for those agency folks. I can imagine we've had a similar issue in some states that I've worked with on other technology. For example, thermal for predators. And so the legislature in a given state comes and says like, okay, the intent of the legislature is that you can use these tools to hunt predators now, but because we don't want to have a problem that we didn't anticipate, we're going to leave the commission the ability to restrict if they need to. That's the approach that they took. Well, some members of the commission were just like, no, we're just going to restrict it all anyway. So basically the legislature gave them the authority. The idea was it's going to be wiped away, and some members of the commission were just like, we kind of want to keep that the way it was. And so, of course, you talk about some upset legislators. You talk about some people, who are, he's like, hey, we gave you this. I mean, that was literally what they said. It's like, what our intent was, and now we've left you some power for emergency reasons, and for limited cases, we wanted you in limited cases to restrict, and instead you've gone the opposite direction, and you're restricting everywhere and just kind of leaving this the way it was. And so it's, I think that's obviously something that you guys are going to have to look, to deal with, because it creates some unique problems if that's if you don't find that middle ground that makes all the parties happy. And your first year will be a challenge, but you're gonna get it right. You're gonna do it.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and I think to your point, not handling the authority correctly is a good way to lose the authority down the road. So I'm very cognizant of that as well, of making sure we implement it in a way, through a process and in a time that meets those expectations. Because as I kind of said earlier, a lot of this was built on trust with the General Assembly, and now it's on us to make sure that we get this in place as quickly as possible within the framework that we have from a legal standpoint to do so.
Well, I was just going to ask that, and Dave hit it, and you hit it. The idea that this is more of a permissive law now that allows you guys. It still leaves you the ability to be, somewhat restrictive. And is there any concern because it's permissive, so you can still restrict it, right?
Correct.
Different states now, we're seeing this where depending on the makeup of the state, the political makeup, or that's not the right wording, but you're getting commissioners now who are, antagonistic to hunting. And so is there any concern that with the permissive nature of the bill, like what happens, what are the politics of the commission, and how do you, what's the thought about making sure that, that the commission is taking care of the thoughts, needs, philosophy of hunters? Any thoughts on that?
We're very fortunate in Pennsylvania to have a board that is very pro hunting. And we talked about from the beginning, that culture of hunting in Pennsylvania. Each of the 9 members on our board completely understand that culture. They come from that culture. They live that culture. They're passing it on to young hunters. A lot of them have connections with some of the stakeholders, in particular, some of the stakeholders and organizations that were working with us side by side on getting this legislation overturned. So they've been involved in those discussions from the beginning. They're continuing with those discussions. They understand what our stakeholders would like to see, what hunters want to see for this year and for the years to come. And they are looking at it like, how quickly can we implement it? But I also appreciate them being cognizant too of, at the same time, let's make sure that we're not having a negative impact on species, because for some, I'm thinking in particular for our wild turkey population, that's a sensitive species. And we don't want to create any risk of potentially over harvesting it by just going full Sundays for all seasons and then finding out later that that was too much and the species couldn't handle that increased harvest, that increased participation. So I think it's a balancing act, right? Like we want to meet the expectations of our stakeholders. We want to provide this for our hunters, but we want to make sure at the same time that we're doing it the right way so that not only do we maintain that trust with the General Assembly, but also that we are upholding the standards of conservation and making sure that the impact on the species is one that the species can handle, so that our hunting traditions can be sustained into the future.
Do you guys have?
Here's the thing that
I was going to ask if you guys have limits on. So, for example, some states you'll have. This is maybe Colorado is a great example of where you can have different approaches and different challenges. So some states limit tag numbers and some states limit dates. Do you guys have any tag limitation numbers on things like turkeys, or is it just dates is how you deal with it?
Mainly through dates. We have some tag limitations. Right now, this time of year, our antlerless deer allocations are on sale. Licenses are on sale. We measure we manage them through an allocation. So that's probably the one our hunters are most familiar with. When it comes to turkey, with your general back tag license here in Pennsylvania, an individual gets a spring gobbler tag where they can harvest one in the spring, as well as a fall turkey tag where they can harvest one in the fall. And that comes automatic with that license. There is the possibility in the spring to buy a second tag, but anybody who buys a hunting license, all 850,000 Pennsylvania hunters have that chance of getting a spring gobbler as well as a fall turkey. So you could see why measuring the season length and being potentially concerned about what Sundays could do to it is something that our biologists are taking a hard look at right now.
Well, I look at what happened as, we were talking about permissive versus restrictive. I think what it's done is it's put you on par with what most other states do. Most other states, it's a permissive thing. I think to the state where Nephi and I are, and I could come up with two examples, and it just seems like this is the type of, it's a tool. It creates a new tool for you for management, right? To have all 7 days to work with. And I look at sage grouse as an example in Wyoming, right? Sage grouse are, they've been struggling for a while. We're one of the few states that still has a sage grouse season. Quotas have been restricted. Anybody can still buy a license, but the way the department and our commission shapes that season to minimize harvest or maybe limit harvest to make sure we don't have problems. We don't have to go to a tag system for sage grouse is, certain parts of the state might have a 3-day long season. Other parts of the state, it might be a 10-day season, but it might only go over one weekend. They might structure it in a way that intentionally doesn't go over multiple weekends because weekends are where you're going to get the most harvest, the most people out there. And so that's an area where you have this flexibility to manage now based on biology. Yeah. But then there's the social side. And I think about where I do my goose hunting, which Nephi will never know about because I never invite him to my goose hunting spot.
I've seen it, but
I know.
Steve, he's very selfish. He's not a man who shares good things with other people.
But what's interesting about the area where I goose hunt is the way that area is managed for waterfowl. It's very specific to the wants or needs of the landowners in the area. So they have it's open 7 days a week, but on certain days of the week you can hunt all day, and on certain days of the week you can only hunt until 1 p.m. And part of that has been landowners in that area saying, there's multiple reasons for it. One of them being, saying, well, we think the geese should have some rest time where they're not being pressured and hunted all the time. I think it's more the landowner wanting the rest time where they don't have people like you noted knocking on their door or interrupting their Sunday brunch to come out and want to goose hunt. But I guess that's my point is it's my long-winded way of saying what this has done, it appears, is it creates more flexibility, not less, for you to be able to manage the suite of wildlife and manage the social dynamics of different parts of the state.
Absolutely. And what you just spoke to, I think really goes to the complexity in setting those season dates and setting those bag limits. And it's why we consistently made the argument that when it comes to Sundays, it should be our board of commissioners making those decisions because they can balance those interests. They can hear directly from the stakeholders. They can hear from internally from our biologists. They can talk to law enforcement who has to actually then go out and enforce it on the ground. They can get their considerations. They can hear that entire suite of options and make decisions. And isn't that better than just written in black and white in the law, no hunting on Sundays? And I think when we gave lawmakers those options, which is a better way to manage species through our board of commissioners that can take into consideration all those things that you talked about, or just a blanket prohibition that dates back, over a century. The choice was clear, and that's why they went with let's let the experts make the decisions. Let's remove the prohibition.
Well, I hope you're taking 100% of the credit for this.
I am not. I appreciate that, but I am absolutely not, because this was just an unbelievable team effort from top to bottom. And I will take credit for one thing, which is our legislative team here at the Game Commission are two individuals that I brought on, and they were down in the trenches. And I know you have a background working with agencies, and that those staff I think sometimes get overlooked, but they were the ones who lived this bill night and day, knew it inside and out, made it to every committee meeting, talked to I don't even know how many people. Like, we would usually, when this started moving, we would begin around 7 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes we were literally the first people in the Capitol, and then we were just door to door from one end to the next, and usually ended the day with some phone calls and some texts back and forth, like around 10, 11 o'clock, and then got back up and did it the next day. So they were the unsung heroes in this thing. So yeah, I absolutely appreciate that, but I am not taking 100% of the credit.
Well, and I say it a little bit tongue in cheek too, because recognizing that it takes it kind of like what we just went through in the West with the reconciliation package and the public lands provision and trying to get that removed. It takes you have to have some people that are just out front leaders, but then you have to have a whole community stand up, and everybody has to be working together, and it just takes everybody working towards a common goal and doing their part and burning the midnight oil.
Yeah.
But it also takes the right people at the right time, and that's where I also say that's why I say I hope you're taking some credit, because I think it does take having the right people in leadership positions at the right time to be able to navigate all of those complex relationships. But then it takes that whole army of people
Absolutely.
standing up and getting behind that and helping. And so, yeah, I was a little tongue in cheek, but also I really, I do want to heap, and I do hope people are heaping a lot of praise upon you and upon the agency, but also recognize it takes it. There's so many people involved in this, especially when you have a million hunters in the state.
It was an unbelievable
about
partnership. It really was, with the hunting groups that came together, with the Farm Bureau coming together, with our staff, with it's just our board of commissioners and the work that they did on building those relationships with key members. And I mean, I'm a political junkie, as you could probably pick up on. So I found it just fascinating. I've thought I should jot this down, for the people who follow us, because it was just an unbelievable accomplishment. And how many little stories I have of kind of coincidences where we were lucky on how some things played out, but at the same time we made a lot of our own luck. And ultimately, though, what I just keep coming back to is just the partnerships that we formed. That's what really turned the tide. That's what made the difference. But on a very personal level, the way I look at it, I remember reading a story years ago of one of my predecessors who was lobbying the legislature to try to get a hunting license bill passed. And he wrote the governor and he said, if I can get this passed, I will die happy. For me, this was my I will die happy bill. So it's something that has a lot of significance.
it's a mic, almost one of those mic drop moments. Yeah, it's it's just it's remarkable, and obviously being out here in the West so far from it, and sometimes scratching our heads at how blue laws still exist in places. But having followed it for a long time, it almost seemed there for a while. It just kept feeling like it was just out of reach. Like at least from where I was sitting watching it, right? It just felt like it was just out of reach. And so the fact that you were able to go from just out of reach to pulling groups, and I mean, you're not understating it, but I'm gonna restate it. Like having a group like the Farm Bureau Federation, for example, step up and ultimately be supportive of this.
Yeah.
That's worth saying again. Like what a big deal that is, and what a big achievement and accomplishment that is to have forged that relationship. Because that has to be, that's so relationship based to be able to get there. So just massive props on that, and would love any reflections or takeaways or advice that you could give to people in other states that are facing similar challenges on some of their legislative priorities. Like, because I think you can apply some of the lessons you learned here and they could be taken all over the country. Right.
Well, I think about it a lot because I want to make sure, again, I meant it when I said I think there's some value in writing some of this down and just remembering what we went through and what the experience was like, so that we can do it again, so that we can continue to build upon the success. So a couple things come to mind, and we already hit on them, but I'll just highlight it again. First, I think the value of phasing something in, being able to have those 3 Sunday hunting days was huge. That I really think that changed the conversation. That showed that it could work. And now it wasn't just us saying that it could work. We actually had data. We could point to an actual decrease in hunting related shooting incidents after Sunday hunting took effect. Not an increase. Everybody was afraid of an increase. They decreased. In fact, 2024 was the safest year that we had on record since 1915 for hunting in Pennsylvania. So we could point to actual hard numbers showing, hey, this works. There's not the conflicts. There's not the increase in accidents. So that was, again, I can't overstate it. I keep going back to it. But as I think about how you can build upon this, when you're talking about making a significant change, one that has been in place for centuries, don't overlook the potential to get there through an incremental process and start. Take a step in the right direction, and then be ready to build upon it when the time comes, and that's what we did. But then the second thing, and again, I know I've said it a million times, but it's that relationships. It's those relationships with the sporting community. Sometimes it means giving up a Saturday, giving up a Friday night to go to a club that's having an event, and they just want to somebody there to do a Q&A from the game commission and talk about hunting. Those kind of events are huge. That's where you build those relationships. We did it with the sporting community. We've done it with the Farm Bureau. I like to joke, I've spent more time this past year traveling our turnpike, because we're here kind of in the southeast, and our turnpike goes to the southwest part of the state. I spent more time on the turnpike in the past year than I have my entire life as a Pennsylvania resident. But going out into those communities and talking to them and hearing from farmers out there who are concerned about crop damage from deer, and talking about solutions, one of which I kept going back to was Sunday hunting. If you're worried about deer damage on your property, wouldn't it be nice to give our hunters an additional day to get out there? And not just any day, a weekend day. And building those relationships with them, there really is no substitute for it. So those are the 2 takeaways for me. And when I think about what we can do moving forward, those are the 2 I'm going to keep going back to.
I'd like you to come talk to my city council about deer. So we'll talk offline. I'll get you an airline ticket, because
I was going to say, you can twist my arm into sending me out to Wyoming. Can we do it in September?
We can bring a bow, because we got as much as I like deer, I actually don't like them in my backyard. That's just a personal.
That's understandable. Yeah.
You're right next to an unlimited whitetail unit, aren't you, Nephi?
Oh yeah, I'm right in the middle of it, like unlimited whitetail does. And here's the funny part: the the Game and Fish employees blame the city, and the city blames Game and Fish, because I seriously will have like, I have some monster bucks, like, and I'm right next to this wetland. This is a 5-acre little, like, they're just rolling through my backyard, and like I see now everybody's gonna hear me gripe. They literally, like, I've got a bunch of aspen trees, like, annihilated all these aspen trees just by stripping all the bark off of them. And I'm sitting here as like, I would kill all of them. I'd kill all of them. And then, but I can't. And so then Game and Fish is like, oh, well, the city could allow you, there's a city, they could let you hunt in the city. I'm like, done. And so then I call the city, and the city's like, actually, no, Game and Fish doesn't want us to let people hunt in the city. I was just like, so I sit watching out my office window as my deer herd rolls through the backyard. Very frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure that we're really respectful of your time. You've given us over an hour of your time here, and I know you've got a lot going on. But I do have to ask one final question that we ask all of our guests. And it's been a while since we've asked this question, so now I have to remember. But this is the Your Mountain podcast, and we so it's really all about the experiences. It's experiences in the outdoors, on public lands, on private lands, everywhere. Like, just all of our experiences and what shape us as a person. And sometimes there's an actual physical mountain that is like our inspiration, and sometimes it's a metaphorical place. And we always ask folks, what's your mountain?
That's a great question. I instantly have a couple places that pop up into my mind. First, David, as an attorney, a fellow attorney, can I get some grace from you on what constitutes a mountain? Because my definition might be a little different than yours. Here,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's actual, it's metaphorical. It can be a field of,
Well, I want to take it literally. I want to take it literally. I'm just afraid my version of a mountain is going to differ than yours. But after we've gotten that taken care of and out of the way. So given that, and I appreciate a very liberal definition of what constitutes a mountain. For me, what came to mind when you asked that is a place on a game lands, which means it's owned and managed by the Game Commission here in Pennsylvania. And it's almost in my backyard. And I absolutely purchased the house when I did because of the proximity to that game lands. So I have what for me is a custom of around mid-March all the way through April until the beginning of our spring gobbler season. I have a custom of I will climb that mountain every morning. If I can. And I've had many years where I've been able to do it every morning. And I just listen to the forest wake up, and I listen to the sound of spring gobblers and that their calls, their gobbles kind of cascading down that valley. And that is a place that it's really hard for me to overstate how important that is to me. And it's something where the meaning has certainly changed over time. When I first started going there, probably 15, 20 years ago, it was with one goal and one thought in mind, which is how can I find out where all the turkey are, so when turkey season comes, I can get down there and harvest them. And I've been fortunate enough to do that from time to time. But as I've grown as a hunter, and certainly as I've grown here at the Game Commission, I've come to understand just what went into creating that mountain and creating that experience. And I think I probably subconsciously just thought that always existed, that mountain was always there. There was always public land there for me or for anybody else to climb to the top of it and listen to nature and listen to turkeys gobbling and everything else. And I've come to understand just how much work went into it. And that land had to be found, had to be acquired, the acquisition had to be approved by our Board of Commissioners. There was work that went into creating the access points, the parking lot, the trail network, managing that area, managing that property, bringing back the turkey population, and what an enormous success story that has been. And it's interesting to me as I've again kind of grown and thought about it all, how my view of that mountain has changed so much, from just expecting it to be there and just thinking it kind of happened naturally, to now understanding everything that went into it. And this past year, as I performed my ritual of climbing it every morning, and thinking about just how my job now as executive director of this incredible agency with that history and that legacy of conservation is to make sure that it stays this way, and to make sure that it's there for my kids, for their kids, and for as many generations as possible to come. So that's what comes to mind when I think about what my mountain is.
Well, we can officially never ask that question to anybody else ever again, because that was a phenomenal response. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Well, thank you, because it's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it.
I don't know if kind of a final thoughts here. I don't know. I was going to start with Nephi, see if you had any final thoughts.
I'm good.
And then go to you, Steve. Any final thoughts from you, Steve?
Well, I just wanted to say, and I mean this with all sincerity, how much I appreciate what you guys have done, and listening to your podcast and how you bring attention to these issues, and the legislative process that for so many of our hunters, it's something that I think they just reflexively shy away from. But I think we've done so to our detriment over the years. And I think it's something that, as much as we don't like to think about politics and wildlife management, having an intersection there, I think it's not reality based. If that's your mindset, I think we have to always be cognizant of the threats, but also the opportunities for success. And certainly, what we accomplished in Pennsylvania is a success story, and it was only done so by recognizing the need to enter that arena and have those relationships and communicate with legislators. So I appreciate all that you guys have done as far as bringing awareness to that. On the East Coast, and certainly out west with everything that's been going on out there regarding public land. So I just look forward to hearing you guys continue the good work that you're doing.
Wow, really appreciate that. Thanks a bunch. That's sort of the reason we started this 7 years ago or so. Was what's that line? I can't remember the movie, but we have a unique set of skills.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
so,
it's Taken, Dave.
Yes,
the movie is Taken.
Thank you.
We're not
Taken.
that. They're not that kind of skills.
Different set of skills, but it's a unique set of skills in this world, I think, and hopefully people find value in it. I'm hoping I see you in September in Tucson. Will you be there?
I absolutely am planning on being there. I just hesitate a little bit because it looks like I just found out I might unfortunately be getting surgery on my knee, which could really complicate this upcoming hunting season. But so I'm waiting to see how that plays out. But depending on that scheduling, I'm hoping to be there.
So here's hoping it's a meniscus, because a meniscus fix, it's the best thing ever. You'll be so happy when you get it done.
Unfortunately, it's not. Yeah, unfortunately, I've had that, and you're right. That it's a quick one. This one doesn't look like it's going to be as quick. But too many years of playing basketball as a teenager. I should have just stuck to hunting, but I was determined to be the next Michael Jordan, and that didn't turn out so well for my knees.
I'm still determined. I play tonight. I play in an old man league, and we're playing.
Are you serious?
Tonight. Yeah. I play in an over.
We used to play when I was in Cheyenne. Dave has the best basketball. He has this. It's at the Masons, right? It's in this gym. Yeah. He has this gym, and it's like the gym is so small that what they've done is these guys rolled in like a couple of old like basketball hoops from like somebody's driveway, with like the wheels on them. They put them on either side, and when they play, it's like Dave like shoots a three, and then he just turns around and he's on defense, and then he turns around and he's shooting threes, and then he's on defense. It's like
it's no running up and down the court for you.
No, it's total old man ball.
It is old man ball. It's a small. I mean, the building was built at the turn of the right around the early 1900s, and the court. If you play 3-on-3 on it full court, That's
They-
about right.
They didn't mean for it to be a basketball court. That's for sure. It's like,
Yeah. But I refuse to give it up. So my
for
knees
you.
my knees are gonna be shot. But I play that a couple times a
don't,
week, and then
he doesn't
I play
jump,
in a city
Steve. He
league.
doesn't jump at all.
I've got
You
a
can't hurt
ground
your
game.
knees
Saves
doing
my
what
knees.
Dave does.
Saves my knees. Well, I digress. We could go down this road forever. But
Well, Dave, maybe if I make it to Tucson, we'll do some one-on-one. How about that?
that would be great. Hopefully your
Okay.
knees all healed up, and you can
Yeah.
you can put me to shame. But
Got it.
I really sincerely thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time, and especially thank you for everything, all the long hours, the sleepless nights, like everything that you put into, that you and your staff and all of your partners put into getting this bill across the finish line. Just such a huge win for, I view it as not just a huge win for Pennsylvania, but it's a huge win for the hunting community nationally, and just, you know, extending just deep appreciation on that.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate your kind words. And again, this is something we've been dreaming about for so long that it still feels surreal, honestly, that it happened. So but I appreciate you recognizing the effort that went into it. And, at the end of the day, as much as it's been hard work, we're excited now about what this is going to look like moving forward. So I'm trying to not lose sight of that too, that this is an unbelievable benefit to our hunters. And now it's on us to make sure that we can get it ready for them to get out there and enjoy it.
And I have no doubt you'll succeed in that too. And hopefully Nephi and I can be some of the ones that enjoy it at some point in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to get you out
Yeah,
here.
the
Definitely want to.
Hershey was great, but it'd be like the woods would be better.
Yes. Unfortunately, no antelope, as we talked about earlier. But yeah, we'll get you out and let you try our whitetail sometime.
Sounds amazing.
Well done, Pennsylvania. Good job.
yeah.
Good job by you. Good job by your employees and hunters in Pennsylvania. Job well done.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Go, if you haven't yet, go out there and rate this podcast. Smash that 5-star review. If you're not digging us, you don't need to go out and rate us. That's fine. But if you're liking what you're hearing, go out and give us that 5-star review. Leave a comment. Find us on social media at the handle @itsyourmountain. Send us an email, yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. And remember, as always, that life is about experiences. So go have one.